Hey everyone, it is nostalgia time once again, and what a journey it was going through the pre-reset builds, all the builds and developments of Longhorn before Microsoft reset development. So, we are going to take a look at some builds from the development reset, and we start with build 5001, which was compiled on September 22nd, 2004. So we'll go ahead and we'll exit saving the changes here. I have already swapped out the hard drive for the post reset, so it should automatically boot up to the build's install disk. And as we can see, because development was reset instead of all those graphical interfaces that we saw throughout the last episode, we are back to the standard default XP style. There were actually two builds before this, though. Build 3790 was actually the first build once the development reset had occurred. However, there is actually a 0-day activation bug upon first boot. But we'll talk about that in just a second here. So we'll go through setup, get a 180-day license, and we'll format the hard disk so we can install Windows. So, like we've seen in XP, the only way we could boot this build is in safe mode. However, upon testing, it apparently did not want to boot into safe mode. Now, this is because the pidgen.dll file in this build was replaced with the one from 3718, which was again a pre-reset build. There are also several missing files, and I was actually asked for those multiple times throughout the installation. But otherwise, UI-wise, everything is going to be pretty much identical to Windows XP. But here in Build 5001, we are going to get some really interesting changes. So, we are done with the first phase of the installation. The only differences I can see is that the copyright date down there in the bottom left has been changed to 2004. But then, just like we saw previously, it goes back to the Service Pack 1 look, where it mentions the addition of Windows. So, of course, if this was the Home Edition, we would see Home, and then we would see Professional. And then we can see the copyright date has been changed back to 1985 to 2001. That's because we're loading into the out-of-box experience, which I believe is, again, the same as in XP, because this is the development reset. So there's the opening animation there. And the only difference also is that we do not see the animated question mark. So they've dropped the question mark in the out-of-box experience. But again, everything else remains the same. So of course, allow me to activate, who will use this computer, and finish, and then we will head to the desktop. So again, the welcome screen, everything else is identical, except I like the background too. We'll talk about that in just a moment. We have a couple of dialog boxes here. The Microsoft out-of-box experience needs to close. But once again, we have the time and date it was logged. And we have this message saying, please help us improve this beta version of Windows. And right there, Server 2003. They actually swapped to the Windows Server 2003 codebase to finish development of Vista, because we're starting over. So we have the Bliss wallpaper, and then we have this picture of a Longhorn, interestingly enough. So I guess that's your takeaway, that this is indeed a development build of Windows. But of course, everything else, as I said, remains identical to XP. Except Windows Media Player in this build has been updated to Media Player version 10. And it doesn't look like it's showing up here. If we go into the control panel, we will now see a portable So there will now be an option for portable media devices, and we would find that somewhere. Where do we find it? Sound, speech, and audio? Yep, here we go. Portable media devices, and I believe this actually would also be implemented into Windows XP with Service Pack 2, I believe, because it was in development around this time as well. The image releaser tool BinPlace was integrated. And we can see the 60-day timer. The details pane in Explorer does not work correctly. You can see it's like a lot of it's cut off. But otherwise, nothing else really has changed. But if we go into help and support, we can see we have Longhorn Help Place, which doesn't work. So those are really the only changes we're seeing here. Now, before we move on to the next build, let's put a folder and a few files on the desktop. We're going to put a briefcase, which it goes up here by default, so we'll keep it there. And then we will add a bitmap, and we'll do our creation of the Willis Tower again. So we'll go to Edit, and it opens in Paint, unlike in build 4093. So let's see if I can do an even better creation of the Willis Tower in downtown Chicago. That's a little bit of a better job, but not the best though. So we'll try XP Horn because it's a mixture of Windows XP and Longhorn. We'll also create a rich text document that will be blank. We'll put a text document on the desktop that will read all of the state of Virginia. Yeah, let's save it. And then we'll add a zip folder that is empty. And then, not sure what else we can do, but I think that's really all we can do for now. So, essentially nothing much here. So, we move on now to build 5048, which is the official developer preview build of Vista. And this build was compiled on April 1st of 2005. And right away we can see that the design has actually changed quite substantially. It now says Windows Longhorn installation. We'll click Install Windows Longhorn, and then there's View Release Notes. But you can see we had a larger Windows flag, and then it said Starting Setup just like before. So it looks like they've carried over the graphical design from build 4093 and all those other builds. Non-componentized Longhorn installs cannot be upgraded. Build 5019 and higher is required. So we cannot upgrade to that build, but this build really has some significant changes. But that's okay. We can go to Clean Install, and it'll move everything. So what will happen is it'll take the Windows, Documents and Settings, and Program Files folders and rename them to .00. So we can click Continue, and then we'll call this one Longhorn. I'll call this Longhorn Vista because we are nearing the end of the cycle. Well, let's also view the release notes for Beta 1 here. As you can see, this talks about file system, offline files, and basically installing on other partitions and MS-DOS and everything like that. It'll keep everything, but it'll just add the .00 extension. So then what we can do is we can go onto the C drive after the upgrade, and we can copy those files back to the desktop and do the modifications again. So, with that said, we will go ahead and let this install, and I believe everything is going to be pretty much identical install-wise, except this is actually the first build of Longhorn that includes a prototype version of the updated Windows Boot Manager that we would see in the final release of Vista. And of course, we would see an updated version, in fact, the same version in Windows 7, its successor. And we would mostly see it in future versions after that. So here's what it looks like. So there's Windows Longhorn and then the legacy pre-release, pre-Longhorn Microsoft Windows. And here's the new boot screen. You can see it again reads Windows codename Longhorns. Everything is now in a shade of white, interestingly enough. And actually, some other interesting tidbits is in the F8 menu, where the background is usually black, it's actually blue. In the security options menu, where you go to boot safe mode, start normally, restart on failure, and everything. And then the boot error is in red. So that's actually kind of interesting that Microsoft color coded the boot manager for errors and options. So that's pretty cool. So now we will just wait for this to complete. So with the installation complete, I can see that in this build, the classic logon style is enabled by default. So yes, we have a new theme in this build, and it is called the Arrow theme. So it looks like this is the first installment of the Arrow theme. However, we do not have proper drivers, so unfortunately we will not be able to see the arrow. We again have new icons, the same icons from the 4093, 4053 build. And we can see Explorer gets an all new design as well. And we'll go into computer here. And we can see that the visual graph is back. So we have the visual graph again. I'll go ahead and take out the build because we do not need it now. That's the new DVD icon. There we go. We can see all the .00s. So we can go into documents and settings 00. Here's my user. And we can see we're logged in as an administrator. And we can go to desktop. And there's all our stuff. We can just go ahead and copy that over or move it, whatever. Do whatever we want with it. And there we go. So everything that we had from the previous build is still here. There's my picture of the Willis Tower and all the text documents in their original form. So we still have the WordPad document that says XP Horn, the photo of the Willis Tower that I have, the new document that says the state of Virginia, the blank zip folder, an empty folder, a briefcase that actually now also opens in an Explorer window. And now this is a more finalized tutorial. So here just gives you some basic instructions on how to use it, which I think was only implemented in Vista. I don't know if it was ever reintroduced or used in. I don't know if the briefcase ever carried over to Windows 7 or anything. This is the first build to include some of the additions that we would see in the final release of Vista. Starter, which again is the reduced functionality for developing markets. Home Basic for low to mid-range computers. Home Premium for most home multimedia machines. However, there are actually 3 Pro editions. Pro Standard is for all size businesses, Pro Small Business for small businesses, and Pro Premium for the Enterprise Edition. But then we have the Ultimate Edition, which merges all elements of Home and Pro into one single release. Now there is actually a welcome screen here, but we can go to the control panels. We can see we have an all new design now. So now it doesn't say pick a category, but we can see the control panel looks pretty close to the final release. So if we go to user accounts, we can change the way users log on and off, and we can use the welcome screen. And we go to the shutdown menu, it still has the classic style. But let's go to, we only have the option to log off. So we'll just log off here. And we can see that that's the welcome screen. So nothing too special about it. It's the same thing from XP. So let's go ahead and turn that off. This is the first build to include a preliminary variant of the user account control that again we would see in the final release. So to enable it, we go to HK local machine, system, current control set, then control, and then we scroll down to LSA. We have LSA PID. So we're going to create a new D word value, and we're going to name it LUA enabled. And we will set that value to 1. Then we need to add a second D word value and call this one installer detection enabled. However, you can see this is the first instance of user account control. It's labeled Windows Security. It says you must run this program as administrator. Do you want to run it? You click run, and then you will need to put in an admin password. So we can type. So we'll have to click the administrator account, and then we will put in the password. And then after it is approved, then it will run. So we'll do it again with the Outlook setup. So we'll click run, we'll click the administrator account, and then we will type in the password. Now this is sort of very familiar to how the user account control would behave in a business environment. Let's take the user account control in a school setting, for example. So then there's groups of administrators and then there's groups of students. So the administrators would have complete access to the machine, what programs should be installed and everything like that. So when one student has like a program that, can be run as an administrator, it'll say, hey, you need permission from the admin in order to execute the program. So we're applying this in a sense that these local users are connected to a domain, to a school domain. So then the administrators on the domain would then need to put in a password in order to be able to install the program on the system. So this is sort of the similar sense that we have here. There is also a Windows System Assessment tool, but however it only includes disk and memory assessments. Microsoft Anna makes a reappearance in this build. It was first seen in 4093, which I forgot to mention. This build, however, was only released in the Ultimate Edition. However, components for the server version are also present. Now, the reason why we were getting the error about the componentized build earlier is that the no upgrade text placeholder should not be present. The registry dword value, I believe, was equal to 0. The componentized build must be set to 1. And the build we were on was 5001, so obviously that's the requirement that was not met. Only one installation, that was the only installation because that other build was the first one. Only one of the equivalent client SKUs are present, as I mentioned earlier, Starter, Home Basic, Premium, Pro Standard, Pro Business. It'll be automatically determined if flag ver suite single user TS, the remote desktop host, is present. A valid SKU with the defined value, and it supports the upgrade paths. And this is actually sort of the same scenario that we would see in Vista. You can upgrade from Home Basic to Home Premium, or you could upgrade from Home Basic to Professional. But in Vista, it's not called Vista Professional, it's called Vista Business. However, in Windows 7, the professional name would return. So, let's see all the new backgrounds in this build. Again, we have the Arrow theme, we still have the XP and Classic themes. In desktop, again, we have a different variant of Bliss, but then we have the regular Bliss. Not sure why there's two Blisses, but otherwise, we also have the Longhorn, which is the background we've got. Purple Flower, I believe that would make it into Vista, but again, I'm not sure. But otherwise, that's really all there is. But then we have a background for Windows Server 2003 in here. So I believe that's for the R2 or for one of the packs of Windows Server. And I can also see that this is the updated Bliss wallpaper. It was actually replaced in this build. And this was actually the very same build that was showed. As I mentioned, it was a developer preview build. So this was actually showcased at the Hardware Engineering Conference on April 25th of 2005, the first day of a 3-day event. So that's really all there is to see on this build of Longhorn. So now we are going to move on to the next build, build number 5098, and this is a pre-beta 1 build of Windows Vista. So let me find the CD here. There we go. And this build was compiled on, move this out of the way. It was compiled on June 28th of 2005. But also, before we start the upgrade, I'm going to remove those user account control values. So this one, and what's the other one? Enable installer detection. Yep, let's delete that value. All right, and now we will start the upgrade. Now it just says welcome to Windows, and when we launch it, we have another new design. We have a nice blue slate, and once again we have to view the release notes, and it just says install Windows, not Windows Longhorn. So we'll go ahead and we'll click install, and here's the new design. We got the Windows flag up there in the top left corner, and we have some new messages. It says install Windows. This installation process will consist of a few easy steps, then Windows will finish installing. Again, pre-release, and it says to upgrade you cannot be running a Longhorn build earlier than 5061. So this build is restricted. We cannot upgrade directly, but just like before, everything from here will go into a .old folder. So we can install Windows on this drive. So again, this is actually the very first build where it puts everything in Windows.old, not Windows.00. Everything will go into Windows.old. However, we can no longer use this build once we do the upgrade. So we'll call this 5098 because that's where we're going. And then we will click next. And that's it. I also see that the countdown clock has been eliminated from this screen. So we will now just let this build do its thing, and then after it is done, we will take a look at it. So here's the welcome screen again. It's in an all new design now. The exact same design that we saw in the installer. So you can see we got the large Windows flag on the side there on the top left. And of course in the center we have what it's doing. And we can see this is the exact same theme that we saw. However, we do have some updates. We can see that when we hover over the start button, we can kind of see we have a greenish tint to it. And here's what the start menu looks like now. So we can see that the icons have once again been updated. And I see we're back to 16-bit by default, so we'll need to set it to 32. And we'll click yes to close the menu. And there we go. We're back to the standard. And the recycle bin, you can see here, it looks very close to the final implementation in Vista, interestingly enough. And then we have another new shortcut. It says, we welcome your feedback on this beta version of Windows. And then down here are some tips and how it says, discover what other people are saying about Longhorn. It says, if you're a developer and user groups and all that stuff, we sincerely thank you for your interest in Longhorn and for helping us improve the next version of Windows. Best regards, the Windows product team. That's for sure. So, of course, the start menu was refined for the arrow look. But then we have UAP settings, but then Games Explorer has been entirely introduced. And we can see a few games. We're only seeing 5 games because it looks like the pinball game has been stripped off the OS. But of course, everything is still their XP implementation. But then there's the parental controls option here. So we could set up parental controls. We'll have to set it up as a local account so we can demonstrate that feature. We also have network presentation settings. Well, we have to connect to a network in order for that to happen. And we can see that these are all of the documents on the system. So this is the new look of Explorer. But once again, we have the visual graphs again. It looks pretty close to the final release. But then we have the .00 from 5048, and then here's the .old. So we can go to Documents and Settings, and then this is the administrator. And then these are, then we go to Desktop, and there we go. These are all the files we had. But then we can also see that the Sorry game was removed from the upgrade. So we can just move all these around, and so I'll just keep these together. The Windows System Test got some additional assessments, DWM, Direct3D, CPU, and there are also TPM support was introduced in this build, although it is TPM 1.2 if I remember correctly. But then TPM 2.0 again would later become the requirement for Windows 11. Windows Installer was updated to version 4. The full volume encryption feature was added. The verbose boot check screen was reverted back, and the Media Foundation protected pipeline was added. But otherwise, it doesn't really look like anything else much has changed here. As if we execute WinVer here, same as before, codename Longhorn, and now it's version 6. It's updating the NT version now to version 6, build 5098. And then, shut down, you can once again see that just like build 4093, we have a shutdown timer. And this is actually sort of a similar feature, because it kind of reminds us a little bit of Mac OS. But here's the same log off menu from that build. Because in Mac OS, when you click shut down or restart, there is a 60-second countdown that, that runs down when you initiate it. So that gives you 60 seconds to close and save all your work. Or if you want to change your mind, otherwise, once the timer runs out, the system shuts down. Now let's demonstrate the parental controls in this build. So we control on, and we can set game rating restrictions. So here we can restrict specific ratings, just like we saw in the pre-reset. Or we can block specific games. So we will set this to cannot play. Let's set free cell as an example. So when we try to execute free cell, the game actually does start. However, this is an administrator. So we would need to go back into the other account. And then when we try to start free cell, we have a lock with the thing, and it says parental controls has blocked this game. To find out why this game was blocked, check your parental control settings. If you need access to this game, ask permission from the person who set up parental controls, in this case, the administrator. So it doesn't say, like, hey, you need an admin password or anything like that, like user account control. No. Instead, it just straight up prevents the game from launching. So now we move on to the official Beta 1 build of Vista, build 5112. And right there we go. The official Beta 1 build of Vista. Once again, there's the auto run menu. This one was compiled on July 20th of 2005. So we'll go ahead and execute the installer. However, it says the image file D is valid, but is for a machine type other than the current machine. Now, from the release notes, it says by normal means it can only be upgraded from build 5099 onwards. It could be substituted with the sources folder from 5098. By setting upgrade allowed to 1 in the environment variables, it is possible to upgrade this build. So that's why we are getting this error. So, since there are some issues with the Beta 1 disk, especially if we were to perform the upgrade, there would be some audio driver issues that would cause Explorer to hang. So that's what we will skip. And especially from what I looked at with the Beta Wiki notes, I'm still reading the Beta Wiki documentation as we continue touring this build. We're going to move on now to build 5215, which is a pre-beta 2 build compiled on August 7th of 2005. And we can see that everything now mentions beta 2 instead of beta 1. And when we click run the program, you can see that the design looks exactly the same, except it now says view the release notes for beta 2, although it still mentions beta 1 right here with just some basic directions. And I see the activation timer has already ran out, but we are going to upgrade to the next build of Windows anyway. Now this is actually the very first build of Windows that actually has support for all editions. And here's a new screen that says get important updates. We are going to skip the updates part, accept the terms and conditions, and there we go. Let's upgrade to this build. Now this is the first build that actually comes in a multi-SKU disc. It comes with all of the editions: Starter, Home Basic, Home Premium, Professional Standard, Pro Enterprise and Ultimate. So instead of Pro Small Business and Pro Premium, it is now in a sort of a placeholder name of Professional Enterprise, which again is just like the Vista Enterprise Edition. And then this is the Ultimate Edition that we're running right now. We're running the Ultimate Edition of Vista Beta 1. Now this build here, 5098, is actually the last build to mention Longhorn exclusively. Because after we upgrade to this build, we are going to see the branding and naming for the final release. Because after this upgrade is complete, we are going to see the final name of the next version of Windows. Alright, so while the installation completed, it already aired out, but this is actually a bug in this build. So if we just restart, it should let us log in. Looks like the same error has occurred. So let's boot into safe mode. But we can see that that blue tint I was talking about earlier, that was only for that other build we were on, 5048, because we can see here in this build, it is back to the standard black, and this would be the case for the final release. So we can boot this build in safe mode, and as we can see, all of our stuff has carried over. That's nice. But there are some changes here. There is supposed to be a network connections program on the taskbar. And then, of course, we have the XP style icons. We run WinVer, we will now see that in this build, it now mentions the edition, the specific edition we're running. So it'll show Longhorn Ultimate in this case. And this would be the same story too with the final release of Vista. It'll show the specific edition you're running. So if you're running Home Premium, it would say Vista Home Premium. If it was Ultimate, it would say Ultimate, like here, in this case. It says evaluation copy expires 8/8/2005, so it looks like it has already expired, which is why it was getting that error. It was giving us that error. Because the actual expiration date isn't really correct. So there is a bug with the expiration time and date in this build. And this is the first build of Windows to identify Vista, mainly in the build string. But if we go to Control Panel, there are some new peer-to-peer and startup applets in the Control Panel. And there is also a new option called Secure Startup, which is pretty much identical to BitLocker, like we see in the current version of Windows, where before even the system boots, you'd be asked to put in a decryption key to decrypt the data to increase security. So, we're going to move on then to another pre-beta 2 build of Vista, 5259, which was compiled on November 17th, 2005. So, let's boot off the disk, and we can see that instead of saying the Windows setup thing, it now says Windows is loading files. Now, of course, we've seen this screen a lot, throughout the series. We've seen this a lot, specifically when we were starting up those CDs for those OEM installs that we have been doing for literally a majority of the series. And once again, we have the same boot screen from before. There are still going to be a few traces of Longhorn, but they are beginning to implement the name Vista. And we can see here's the Windows thing, and it says repair problems with Windows Startup, which is a new feature, but we're going to install this build. So you can see here's the Aurora background. It's almost like the final release. But here's the new arrow design. Ooh, it's starting to look close to being final. But this is a recompile, so we're going to install the Ultimate Edition. So now it says Windows Longhorn Beta 1. We'll accept the license agreement. And we're going to, of course, do a custom installation. Here's our main partition. We're going to install it there. Again, that's the reminder that everything will be going on Windows.old. We'll call this Vista Beta 2 because we are in that stage now. So we can see some minor wording change, and I'll let you all enjoy the rest of the setup. So here is the out-of-box experience. You can see this now mentions Windows Vista. And the out-of-box pretty much almost looks final. We can type in our name. We still have the XP pictures though. We will not apply a password. It's asking us for a computer name for a second time, even though we were prompted to put one in earlier. Let's go with the nice beachy background. I like that. But now we have three categories: recommended, only install updates, and ask me later. But recommended is the use recommended settings. And then of course this is where you set your time. You only get the option to set the time though, the time zone, but not the date yet. And this says you're ready to start instead of thank you. So those are some differences here as we are getting very close to Vista's final release. The screen has remained the same. This is a new user account control menu. This is an updated menu. And see some updated blue messages there. And we can see the start menu looks pretty close to the final release. The lock icon looks almost final, except here This is where we get options to log off and shut down the machine. We also have an early variant of Windows Defender known as anti-spyware. And of course it does everything like so. We also have an updated Media Center, which I believe it received some substantial updates, although it will still be the Media Center from XP. So nothing too different. Almost identical to the Media Center in Windows XP, except some buttons do not work or function as intended. Now, going back to build 5231, this was actually the very first PO reset build to allow an upgrade from Service Pack 4 of Windows 2000 and XP, although it requires 223 to go from earlier builds. It was also the first build to have a graphical hibernating screen. And of course, a tray network icon here, which I believe this is it. Yep, this is the one that was updated. There's a new arrow theme, and Windows Media Player 11 was also released. But here, this still mentions Media Player 10. There's also the Windows Digital Gallery, which doesn't appear to be in here, and I believe it is. Now, the Windows Digital Gallery is actually in here. However, it is now called Photo Gallery, which again, you get to view sample pictures on the system or any pictures that you have taken. The Register Windows Photo Library wizard contains several leftovers from the digital image library but have since been removed. The Windows Calendar also got an update, which I do not think is in here. No, it's not in here. So there have been some updates there. And the DVD Maker was also introduced, although it doesn't look to be in here because this is the Tablet PC edition. But essentially, it's the same. But essentially, you know what that does. There's a new loading ring because this is Internet Explorer 7. And of course, there's some updates to Media Center and Movie Maker, because I don't think it is now just labeled Movie Maker. However, we cannot start it because there are no drivers. There are some renamings of some programs got renamed. SSL Protection is now Remote Desktop. Health and Support has a new look. Fax Console is now Fax and Scan. Save Dock is now Backup, and the Mobility Center was introduced. The SAT Aurora has been updated, and speaking of the control panel, you can see we have the new Windows flag down here, and we can see that that's really the only changes graphical wise except some new options here. Windows Update is also here now. So, of course, this is where you go to check for security updates. Other things that were added, including ease of access, network center, mobility center, power management into the power options, audio devices, and sound themes. We will find that here in sound and speech recognition, which of course behaves like so. This is a new menu. And of course we won't be able to hear the sounds because there are no drivers, which is why it won't let us play. There is an arrow wizard for updating drivers now in the device manager. And if we open up the system properties, there is now a rating system here. So this is where you go to rate your computer, and it'll give a hardware mobility score. The migration wizard is just labeled MIG Wiz, and it does not work in this build, apparently. So that was everything from 5231. In this build, this was actually the first build to include the new Start Orb, as you can see. This first appeared in the dev check and compile of 5212. And again, it has been completely designed almost identical to the final release of Vista. But if we run WinVer, which apparently we can't from here, but we can, because I see it down there, we can see that all mentions of Longhorn on this end have been removed, and it now reads Windows Vista. And I just saw the transfer thing right here. So here this shows, again, behaves the same way. So it has to close all your programs before transferring all your data. And then if we go to taskbar properties, we can see it still mentions XP. But then if we enable the classic start menu, the log off mention is gone. It has been removed. There's also a taskbar, and then there's even a shortcut that initiates Flip 3D. But here's the show desktop thing. That did make it. I don't know if that actually made it into the final release of Vista. That's interesting. The icon to report a bug is now known as feedback. Again, this is the exact same as before. The user account control will look more identical to the RTM release, although that doesn't look like what we're seeing here. Ready Boost was also introduced, where you can use it to use USB drives as virtual RAM. Command bar color is now solid blue-green. Navigation buttons are updated for the classic theme. The system folders are no longer hidden by default, and the functionality to hide or show system folders have also been removed, with a new help icon being added to the command bar in Explorer. Right there. There are also new search filters. A more green WinSat to world name has been updated. Oh, it's been implemented. Windows Mail is now included by default instead of Outlook 6. That's what it looks like. There are also some new games on here too. Let's see if we can find the game section. Here we go. And we can see some new games here. So here's Purple Place. You can see there are only 2 games. There would be a third one in the final release of Vista. So pretty close to the final release, but there also is a Shanghai Solitaire here that did get its final icon. This is Mahjong. But then, of course, you cannot upgrade or install or upgrade this build from any pre-reset build or 5048, which I did not do. System restore is broken. But otherwise, that's really everything that's happened in this build. So we are going to move on now to the next build, number 5270. This is the .9 variant of this build that I have. This is the December 2005 Community Technology Preview build of Vista, which was compiled on December 14th, 2005. We can see the date and time properties have also been updated. So we can change that. We'll set it to the 14th, which was a Wednesday. And okay. And we can see the autoplay here looks very final, almost like the final release. We'll go ahead and run the setup program. And again, it wants me to confirm to open the setup. And here we are again. So we'll install now. And then this is where we're going to be hit with some major changes upon completion. So let's wait for the installer to begin. And again, here's the important updates we're going to tell it not to. So now the agreement mentions Windows Starter 2007 Beta 1, Vista Beta 1, and server codename Longhorn. So we'll accept the agreements. However, it says to upgrade, you must be running build 5260 or later, XP with Service Pack 2 or later, or 2000 Professional with Service Pack 4 or later. We do not have build 5260, so we will have to do a clean install. And I'm fine with that. So again, this will move everything to Windows.old. We'll call it Vista 5270, and now we'll just let it go. So here's the out-of-box experience. Once again, nothing too special here. Oh, keep the name the same. We're going to do the fish this time. And I don't think we can go back. But once again, we have the use recommended settings. Again, no date. And still says you're ready to start. So then we'll click start. So here is the new logon background design in the form of an aurora. That login screen was just like what we saw on the installation media. However, though, there are going to be a few adjustments here. So as we can see, we have an update to the start menu. Once again, nothing changed except now the user icon is in the right place. We have the new icons up on the top, just like in the final release of Vista. Once again, we have all of the games. So now we have the new network icon, which has once again been updated. Here's the save to remove hardware menu, and this one is on the new name Windows Defender, which would be the permanent name for the final release. The date and time looks almost like the final build, except now we have a clock and a calendar on the side. And if we open up Explore, we now have a taller command bar, redesigned command buttons. The WinSAT Aurora has been updated, and now we have the near final orb. And in this build, there is a new program called Windows Collaboration, which would later be known as Windows Meeting Space. So we'll accept the privacy policy. And here's the updated user account control. And here you can view more details. And we can click permit or deny. So we'll click allow. And then if we look further into the system, particularly the accessories, the final icons have came for Paint, WordPad, and Notepad, so they all got their final icons. The migration wizard is now known as Windows Transfer, but we do not see it here. We will find it, however, in System Tools. Yep, it's now known as Windows Transfer. Feedback is now known as How to Share Feedback, and we will find that on the desktop. So we'll move this down. It's still known as feedback, but again, this is still the how to report a bug thing. There is no supplemental driver pack wizard. A few updates have also rolled out to Internet Explorer 7. Let's see the toolbar below the tabs section. That's what there is now. The tabs are slightly smaller, and the icon is now exactly like what we would see in the final release. And now Windows Media Player has been completely revamped, and now it is known as Media Player 11. This is where you can share your library with your Xbox or Media Center PC. The menu bar is now black instead of blue. The play bar icons have also been updated. The sounds from Purple Place have also been removed in this build. And then if we go to Control Panel, we will also see some updates. Again, nothing much here, except we have additional options. And here is the Mobility Center, but we do not get it here. They all got their new icons. And then if we take a look at the right-click context menu, we have Choose Desktop Background. This is where you go to choose your wallpaper. We again still have the stuff from XP. Personalized Computer opens up the personalization options where you can go to change screensaver and sound schemes. And here, and we saw it for a moment, and here is the screensaver as we have it right now. This is not the final screensaver, as the final screensaver would feature the animation of an aurora, but again, it still makes mention of Windows Vista. In this build, it is now known as Logon. However, it shows duplicated. A screen save, which just throws up a blank error message with a yellow triangle. So, really, that's what that is. And when upgrading from 2000 or XP, it would change to the IMG24 background. This will persist, though, until we get to build 5466. And for the starter edition, this is the first build that will block processors newer than a Pentium 3. Otherwise, in that case, the only way you could use this build was in safe mode. So I've tried the previous two builds with different configurations, and while some of them made it to the second portion of setup, however, neither of them were able to install successfully. So, at this point then, we're going to skip right over to build 5381, which is the official Beta 2 preview build. It was compiled on May 1st, 2006, and as we can see, this first screen looks pretty much like the final release, except for the fade effect, which is not present. So we'll go ahead and begin the setup. And this is a multi-SKU disk. Just like before, we're going to install the Ultimate Edition. And now it mentions Starter Beta, Beta Server Codename Longhorn Beta. We're going to do a custom install and install it on the disk. And now the installation begins. So here is the out of box experience, which again is getting very close to the final release. So we'll put in our username like so. Let's go with a cute little dog. A cute little dog this time. And we'll call it Vista. We'll call this Vista Finale since we're getting close. We're gonna do the mountain background this time. And we're starting to see some of the final wallpapers. We have install updates only, ask me later, recommend settings, and that's what we're going to do. And now here we see the calendar and the clock, but this still says you're ready to start, but now it's been moved to the center. And now when we click start, because we are still well along in the development, and there is the prototype orb that would be seen each time the system boots before the logon screen. And now we're getting close to the final prompts. It would say logging on and preparing your desktop. Oh, we actually got working sound this time. That is awesome. And now it says, welcome to your computer. This would not be seen in the final release. But here it shows the edition, the activation status, and the manufacturer and model, which I believe it does show in the final build of XP. So here are some of the gadgets. This is the slideshow. Here's the clock. And here is the feed, which defaults to Internet Explorer. And let's see what Media Center looks like now that we have proper audio drivers. And of course, Media Center won't work properly, even though it will. But again, this looks like XP. But we can see the new icon for the Media Center that would be implemented in Vista. Let's just go ahead and set it up anyway. So, yep, nothing too special here. It's still XP in this particular build. And let's see what we have. So we also have a calculator gadget, which again, as I mentioned, what build this was introduced. So we can have a calculator gadget on the desktop, and we can do like so. We can do everything to the squared power. And I believe we can also move gadgets off the sidebar. It looks like, yes, we can in this build. We also have a currency conversion tile. So in fact, a lot of these didn't make it to the final release of Vista. So again, the currency, I believe you can put in a, but yeah, this doesn't work. So I believe what that is whatever money shows up, it'll convert it to US dollars or whatever. So here's some more. Here's an egg timer, which again does it like so. You can, let's see here, you can set it for a specific amount of time. So let's do 5 seconds, for example. And then as you can see, or is that 5 minutes? Yeah, it says 5 minutes. And I believe we can move it to the end, like so. There's also these stocks. We can also put the recycle bin on the sidebar, which again just acts like the recycle bin on the desktop. So let's put 2 recycle bins on our desktop. That's amazing. And this is the first implementation of Picture Puzzle, which I believe would be in the final release of Vista. And this also would later carry over to Windows 7. We also have a number puzzle, which is just like the picture puzzle except with numbers. And then we have notes. This would be the first implementation of sticky notes aside from XP. So you can just type whatever we want to. And as you can see, once it's up, it just flashes. It just flashes in a constant seizure and clicks. Or is that just me clicking stuff? Okay. So we have a CPU meter. Let's see if we can get the ta-da sound to play again. So is that from the timer? I don't really know. Yeah, jeez Louise. I am quickly running out of room. We can see the personalized menu also looks like it's from the final release. So there's still some leftover XP icons, but I'm sure those would be changed eventually. We have the Vista Basic, we don't have the Vista Aero. And then we can go to display settings and we can increase the resolution. So we will say yes to apply these settings. So this is pretty neat. So we could do this and we just make it. So we can set the timer for 5 seconds and it'll play the ta-da sound every. Yep, like so. But let's continue touring the system and seeing how everything goes. Now, because I installed the Ultimate Edition, this also comes with Windows Ultimate Extras. So those are like some extra components. Windows Collaboration also gets an update here. And I believe this will be the last build that we would see before it becomes meeting space. But of course, it acts just like so. Media Player is now identifying itself as Media Player 11, but everything is capitalized here. And this looks pretty close to the final release. The player is searching for digital media files in the background. And as we can see, these look like the exact songs from the final release of Windows Vista. This one being my favorite. Let's do another let's do another 10 seconds on the clock. But anyway, let's go to the games section here. Could set up game updates and options. And Inkball is also here. So so this behaves just like in XP. And of course the objective of Inkball is simple. First you gotta get the balls into the correct color holes. And I believe there are several levels throughout this game. But of course I do not have the time and sake to play them all. That was actually added in, again, build 5337. Paint was also redesigned in that build, and we will see that redesign here in this build. And as we can see, we have the colors at the top there instead of at the bottom. And then we have all the other stuff on the sides, so we can add shapes and everything like that. And we can also fill them in with a nice shade of black in certain spots. How cool. And we'll save it. And we're gonna put it on the desktop. It doesn't look like it shows a graphical interface, but we can set it to desktop and we'll just leave it as untitled. So we'll click save and there's our photo. And we can see Mahjong Titans has got its final name and it's loading. And of course these games are just like what we would see in the final release. So that's what that is. There was also a redesigned sipping tool in the start menu. There was a large toolbar and fax and scan, and some UI changes were made in Media Center, which we had just seen earlier. Disk defragmenter was overhauled, and the Windows slideshow can notify when a new gadget was installed. New icons were also given to defragmenter power options, power report. New icons were also given to disk defragmenter, power options, problem reports and solutions, and memory diagnostics. The Ultimate Escher's banner in Windows Update is now a blue-green gradient. The Network Center sidebar is also now blue-green gradient. Color management and power options have also gotten UI changes. And as I mentioned earlier, we can see that that is the final banner for Vista Ultimate. And as we explained earlier in the episode, just like with Longhorn Ultimate, if you'd install the Starter Edition, you'll see Vista Starter. Home Basic, you'll see Home Basic. Home Premium, you'll see Home Premium, and so on and so forth. However, portions of WinVer in the Starter Edition are missing. The WinVer branding still uses the XP gradient bar, however, this would actually persist in the RTM build with certain modifications. So, that's really everything that happened in this build. Now, before we continue on, there actually is something, now that we have sound working, that I actually wanted to try. I actually wanted to try since we started this. So, before we move on to the next build, there's actually a few other things that I would like to do. First, we're going to create a blank folder. We're also going to create a briefcase. You can see the autoplay menu there is very close to what we would see in the final release. And then we'll also add, we already have a bitmap image. We can add a contact information here. Let's just put a whole bunch of gibberish. Okay. Do you still want to add this? Well, we're going to use that as a sample contact. Just LK. Kind of neat. We can add a journal document because Windows Journal is here. No. So we'll just create a test note in Windows Journal. All right, let's save it. And then we will make a rich text document. Put a bunch of gibberish in there. And we'll also create a text document that will read just this gibberish here. And lastly, we'll add a zip folder that is blank. Now, I've actually been wanting to do this since the pre-reset. Now, some people may think of the Samsung media sounds for, the Longhorn builds. They may attribute it as such. But as we can see here, here's an updated user account control option. Here's the updated copy file action. And I will also copy this file to the desktop. All right, so here is the final product with those Longhorn sounds that I have added. However, for some reason with the theme it's delayed. But as you can see, it says welcome to your computer. That's the welcome center that runs upon boot. But I believe the sound scheme correctly applied. I actually would like to check and see if it did. Well, I just got my answer. All right. Now then, we're going to move on to the next build. Build number 5456, which is the first of the pre-release Candidate 1 builds. Here's the updated user account control menu. And this build was compiled on June 20th, 2006. So about a month has passed since this build. So we're going to go to computer now and we will open the disk. We can see we have the Vista icon and it's now under Microsoft Windows Publisher. So apparently that's the name of the application. And here it is. You can see this is getting pretty close to the final release. So we'll go ahead and we'll click install now. And you can see we got that cool looking hourglass. So this is looking pretty close to the final release, but we'll say no updates. To upgrade, you must run Vista build 5383 or later, or XP with Service Pack 2 or later, and says setup has failed to perform upgrade compliance checks. The upgrade option is disabled. And I believe it doesn't say it's a bug. It doesn't look like it's a bug. So we do not have this build available to us. So we're going to have to do a custom install. So again, we can upgrade. However, this is going to move everything to Windows.old. Alright, so this out of box looks to behave much more like the final release. We're going to go with that nice, cute kitty cat this time. And we can see the flower. The background doesn't change right away. So let's just go ahead and just call it Vista RC1 because we are at that point. Now this says install important updates for Windows only. But again, this says recommended settings. Here's where we set our time. Again, that still says you're ready to start. And I believe that progress bar at the beginning was a hardware check that's happened before the out-of-box experience, because in later builds, and especially the RTM, this would be seen only after the out-of-box initially is done. And there's a much larger implementation of that. And of course the sound scheme reverted back. Getting your desktop ready. This may take a couple minutes. Of course, we'll give it a couple of minutes. Oh, that didn't take a couple minutes at all. That took much longer. That actually took a little less than a few minutes. So here's the same welcome center in which we have some updates. It mentions the performance rating, and clicking here takes us to more details. It now mentions Vista Ultimate Service Pack 0, and this says automatic activation will begin in 3 days if we don't do anything. But here we have a few other options. But again, if we go into the C drive, windows.old, and we find our media folder, there's the Samsung media scheme that we had from the previous build. And now we will hear it. So this pretty much looks almost like the final release. I really like that. That is pretty nice. Anyway, we move on now to another release candidate 1 build. This is build 5472. Since we are upgrading from 5456, IMG22 will be the default background that we will use. So, this one was compiled on July 13th, 2006. So, almost a month has passed. So, July 13th, 2006. We'll click OK. As you can see, we almost have the final setup icon. It's asking once again. And as you can see, this is what it looks like now. We're getting closer to the final release. Now let's see what updates we have about Media Center, if we have any updates there. So we can see nothing has changed here, except we still have the XP sounds. Alright, let's go ahead and see if we can upgrade to this build of Vista. So now we have what looks to be the final icons, along with the product key page. And it'll let us upgrade. Okay. So that's awesome. So now it'll check the compatibility of the device, just see if there's anything that might prevent us from doing so. And it looks like there is nothing that will stop us. So that's awesome. So here we go. We are upgrading to build number 45472. And we will just let it go and we'll see what happens when it's done. So here's the same out-of-box experience again. It wants us to review the date and time. And now this is the first build where it assesses the system performance following the out of box experience. Be secure, Windows security. Let's see what it shows next. On time, Windows calendar. So I guess it just shows some slogans, I believe. So in this build, there are some updates to the design, but otherwise, it doesn't look like there is anything else too major about this build. Keep in touch, Windows Mail. Capture memories with Windows Movie Maker. So that board has not changed. And you can see that the cursor is final. The preparing your desktop text and the spinning wheel there are also final. So everything login wise except for the background is final in this build. Alright, so let's run the setup off the D drive. And the user account control here looks absolutely final. And let's go ahead and install this build of Windows from an Explorer setup dialog box. Ooh, let's see what happens. So you can see the whole background, everything looks final. We are going to install the Ultimate Edition because that's what we're coming from. And here we go again. We are going to press upgrade. But once again, it looks like we'll have a buggy VGA graphics driver. So it'll let us upgrade once again. So I'll just go ahead and close the task manager so I don't. Alright, so here's the out-of-box experience on this build. And now it's really starting to look complete. It's really starting to look complete with that language selection screen. But once again, we have the please wait while Windows checks your here's performance. We have the same text blurbs from before. So here we can see the Vista Ultimate branding. That's final. The background is now final. What's the date set to? July 12th, and this bill was compiled on the 26th. So, I don't see the sidebar, but it doesn't look like the sidebar is even active. There we go. We can run the sidebar, and as we can see, everything's looking very close to the final release. The clock is. The CPU meter is also looking like the final release. The feed headlines, I believe, also looks like from the final release. The stocks are also, I believe that's also from the final release. And so is the picture puzzle. So it looks like here at this point, everything looks like they're from the final release. Here's the how to share feedback button. Again, it's the same thing as before. That's the only place where it still makes mentions of Longhorn. Now, I believe since we did a clean install, for some reason it cleared everything. Let's look in the windows.old folder because I'm sure it kept everything. No, not here. It's in users. Here's our main account. And we can go to desktop and we can see everything that we had is still here. So the sound scheme there is absolutely final. So there we go. So you can see everything that we've had is still here. You can see all of these look like they've got their final icons, including the journal, which doesn't appear to open at all, but everything else still works. Still the contact information there. The random drawing doesn't appear to be opening. Oh. Yeah, there is buggy VGA graphic drivers on here, so that is most likely what is what'll continue happening. Media Center also got some enhancements, but it says it can't open this program because it's been restricted. Wow. Okay. But also there are some new in-applet graphics. The mouse offline sync center and system icons were also updated in the control panel. So we can go there and take a look. However, well, since we have that lock, we can't really do anything. But nonetheless, I'm sure we will be seeing all of these, but pretty much otherwise, everything looks pretty close to the final release of Vista. Even the boot manager is the final implementation that we would see there. So, anyway, we are going to move on then to 5520, which is the next build of Vista. So, this is another release candidate 1 build. We'll go ahead and change the date. This one was compiled on August 12th, 2006. And everything is beginning to look final considering that we are nearing the end of the development cycle. So we'll go ahead and we'll open up the CD and run the installer. So again, yes, we will proceed. And we can see because we are approaching release candidate 1, everything here looks pretty much final and everything behaves like the final release. And we can't really see the system properties either. So again, no, we will not get the latest updates. Once again, it's a multi-edition, so we're going to do the Ultimate Edition. And now it mentions Release Candidate 1. And yes, we can upgrade to build 5520. So as the setup nears completion, you can see that this is the new boot screen, which looks almost like the final release, except the only difference is it says the copyright year 2006 Microsoft Corporation with the all rights reserved tag. Here's what the out-of-box experience looks like now, and because we did a clean install, we've pretty much lost all that stuff. We're gonna do the clock towers, or yeah, let's do the dog again since we're nearing the end of the development cycle. And we can now see that the backgrounds actually do function. Let's actually keep the nice landscape that we had earlier, and it looks to be broken in this build. Okay. Anyway, use recommended settings. Um. Okay. That looks like the out-of-box experience is frozen. Was there any notes in this build on such? Oh, there we go. There's the home network. And there's the thank you that we would see in the final release. And you can see these look to be some placeholder icons. Smart, meet, beautiful. Browse with control and confidence. Family safety settings. Make face-to-face meetings more productive. So this is talking about all the new developments and Vista. The most secure Windows to date. Well, it was as of 2006, but not anymore in 2025. Information and tasks at your fingertips. And we can see the build string. It now identifies it as a pre-release candidate 1 build. And the orb is getting close to what we would see in the final release. But it does not look like we have any sound, do we? I don't think I heard the startup sound because I had the speaker off. But as we can tell, now this is behaving just like the final release, where we cannot interact with the cursor until we're fully logged in. This is the Welcome Center that looks very much like the final release. Here's the Live One Care that was in development at this time too, along with Windows Live Toolbar. Here's about Windows Live, the Marketplace, Live Mail Desktop, and Live Messenger. And those were all things. And as we can see in this build, everything is beginning to come together. So we got meeting space, DVD maker, doesn't meet the requirements. So there we go. Meeting space is in its final state. So pretty much at this point, it does not look like anything else much is going to change here as we are nearing the end of the cycle. The File Explorer pretty much looks final. And this Vote Now program, I don't think I've seen this one. You need to be valid with a valid domain in order to vote. So now we have a windows.old.00 folder. And one of them contains all the stuff from the other install. And we can go to desktop, and so it's not this one. Now there are two .olds. So I guess if there's two copies of Windows.old, then I guess it'll just put the later one as 00. So then we can go to users, my account, and desktop. There's all my stuff. So now we can just move those out of the folder and put them back where they belong. And there we go. Everything is now in place. If you look at the gadgets, yeah, we don't have that egg timer anymore. That's sad. But then here's the weather gadget. So pretty much everything in this build is behaving like the final release. And that is true since we are nearing the end of the development cycle. But of course, everything's still here. We have the program compatibility wizard. So it looks like it's a prototype. So of course, that's to address compatibility issues. And the contact is still here. The rich text document is also still here and still opens. The new text document also still opens, along with the picture. It doesn't glitch out before it even opens anymore, so that's good. The new journal document actually now opens in a proper Windows Journal version, which is good. We still have our blank zip folder and our blank main folder. Let's make a copy of the untitled file and put this in the new folder. And you can see that this is also the final implementation here. Again, because we are nearing the end of the development cycle. So, with that and nothing else exciting to see, we are just about done here. So, we're going to move on to build 5600, the official release candidate 1 build of Windows Vista. And it was compiled on August 29th, 2006. So we'll change the date to August 29th. And also, before we proceed, we still have some XP sounds. So yeah, some XP sounds are still there on the system. So that's new. That's the shutdown sound. That's still from XP. Still from XP. But as we get to the official release candidate 1 build, we will be getting a whole new set of sounds. However, there are incomplete disk drivers. There's errors with disk drivers in the Windows pre-installation environment. So on some machines, the setup could fail to copy disks. But we're going to see if that's the case. So we're going to tell it no, do not get the latest updates, and I believe we can skip the product key. And here is a pretty familiar error message that we got. It says you cannot upgrade from a stage build to a non-stage build. And again, it will move everything to Windows.old. So let's see if it copies all of the files. So let's see what happens. If not, then we will determine how we're going to do it from here. So let's see what happens next. Well, that took to me it felt like a freaking eternity, but that's finally done now. We're gonna do the soccer ball or collection of balls. And there's the use recommended settings. We'll do that. And the public location apparently is a monorail. Interesting. And there's the home, and that's it for that. So now we'll let it assess the system performance, and then we will arrive at the desktop. And even though we're on release candidate 1, we're still getting the XP sounds. Or maybe that might not be the case. We again have the program compatibility wizard just like before. And actually down here it actually now mentions the directory where the Windows is installed. Again, the welcome center and pretty much everything else on the system looks like the final release. And we go to the properties, mentions Vista Ultimate. So that does confirm that we are actually at the end of the cycle now. So we'll open up the Windows folder, but now we have windows.old.001, which tells us that this is our previous installation, which we could not upgrade from directly. And just like before, all of our stuff that we've had is still here. So the pictures that we've had, all the folders and documents and everything like that, those all carried over. So with nothing else to report on release candidate 1, we move on now to the official release candidate 2 build of Vista, which was compiled on October 3rd, 2006. And this was seemingly a last-ditch effort to gain some sort of popularity or any sort of support, I should say, for Windows Vista because of its long development cycle and how all these computer companies and manufacturers have been following along with Vista's development the whole time. Especially with Microsoft's Vista Capable program that they implemented with certain Windows XP computers. Now, with the Vista Capable program, computer manufacturers and OEMs continued to include XP preloaded on new computers due to the negative perception of Windows Vista. So, what would happen is, as I just said, computer manufacturers would continue to preload XP on their machines for about another year or so, but the end user could request an upgrade copy to Windows Vista. However, there was a problem, a major problem at that. Those computers only had to meet the minimum requirements of the OS, of the entire operating system, not the Aero specifications. And the biggest issue of all with Vista was that there was a lack of driver development kits during the development initially and through its reset. So, by the time Vista launched, not many computer manufacturers, if not all of them, were not prepared for the issues Vista was going to face, mainly with the NVIDIA drivers, as those were responsible for 80%, almost all crashes in Vista upon launch. However, these problems would be later addressed in Service Pack 1 and 2, the two service packs that were released for Vista. However, the damage had already been done. And also, when people saw the television ads for, all these cool Aero features and everything like that, when they installed Vista, many were going to get what they saw, the Aero effects and Flip 3D and all that stuff. They didn't get that because their machines were not capable of such functionality. So, at this point, Vista was pretty much destined to fail. However, these issues would be much neededly addressed with the following release, Windows 7, and we'll be taking a look at its development process in the next episode. But right now, pretty much release candidate 2 is going to be very identical to pretty much all the other builds we've seen so far. So let's just skip right to the out of box. And we can now see the final boot screen, which has just been reduced to Microsoft Corporation and that same bar from earlier. So here is the out-of-box experience for release candidate 2. We can see that pretty much everything here looks to be final. And this time we'll do the cute cat. And how about, since we're on release candidate 2, maybe we should do these nice pearls. Let's do that. We'll call this, we'll name this Vista Final because this is the final release candidate build before RTM. And we can see that this is on the final name, install important updates only. And we can click central time. And this is a home location. We can see the public location is now back to being a bench, like it should be. So now we will let it assess. So as you can see, these are the final text blurbs. So those are going to be what we will see in the final release. See the icons, the text, descriptions, everything. It's all final. Considering this is release candidate 2. And because we did a semi upgrade, I believe that in this second release candidate build, we are going to be getting our first glimpse at the final sounds that we will hear in Vista. So at this point, since we're nearing the end of development, we're pretty much at the end of development at this point. We still get the XP sounds even though we're on release candidate 2, interestingly enough. So that's interesting how the XP sounds continue to persist even as we are on the second release candidate build. But everything else about the OS, aside from the sounds, are final. And yep, that is exactly how Vista's sequence normally is. It's normally the initial startup, and then when you log in, you hear the log on sound. So it's just like that. And just like before, we can go ahead and go into the C drive. We have a .2 now at the end of our folder. And we can open up the desktop, and there's all of our stuff. We can go ahead and move that out of the folder. And there we go. You can see 5744, the release candidate 2, now mentions RC2. And you can see everything's still here. We still have that untitled picture we created at the beginning, screenshot of Chicago, the text documents from earlier, and all of that good stuff. So, with everything looking pretty much complete, at this point we can pretty much set the date to anything we want. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at our final destination, the release to manufacturing build of Windows Vista. However, not really. We're not really going to the release to manufacturing build. We're actually going straight to Service Pack 2 of Windows Vista, which again is essentially the RTM build, but it does have some stability updates. So here's the auto run. Let's run the setup. You can see there that's its final icon. And I am actually loading this off of an actual disk, not an actual install disk of Vista. I actually found a copy of Service Pack 2 off the Internet Archive and burned it onto a CD. And there you go. As you can see, this screen is the final release. So it's going to take a little longer than previously because we're going off an actual disk now. But again, everything else will be exactly identical. And this is a multi-edition disc. So just like before, we will not get any updates. This time we'll skip the product key. We're going to install the Ultimate Edition. This is Service Pack 2. And it looks like we cannot do an upgrade because it says to upgrade you must be running build 6000, 16386 or higher. You have to be running Vista with Service Pack 2. This is because Vista not only had 2 service packs, but was the first version of Windows, the first of the remaining 2 that got service packs, to not allow cumulative upgrades. In order to update to Service Pack 2, you have to first update to Service Pack 1. You have to go to Service Pack 1 from RTM, and then you can go to Service Pack 2 from Service Pack 1. So we can do a custom installation, but again, it'll move everything to Windows.old. It'll be .old.003 in this case, because we've been going from multiple builds. But otherwise, this is exactly like the final release, so we'll just let it go and we will come back when this is done. And here we are, the final release to manufacturing builds out-of-box experience. Once again, we can put in our name, the dog. We'll let the dog greet us. And these are the final backgrounds. This is the exact same background from those pre-release builds. We'll actually keep it for this one. We'll name this Vista SP2. We'll use recommended settings. And we're going to actually change the date to, let's change it to April 11th of 2017, because that is when support for Vista completely ended. Mainstream support ended halfway through its cycle in April of 2012. Or then on April 11th of 2017, Vista reached full end of support. And we can see that this is the final checking your performance screen. And that orb is final. And now we have the final startup sounds and basically the final sound scheme. But here it is. Windows Vista in its final form. You can see the sidebar load up. We do not have a build string anymore. So there we go. We can go to my computer and we can see all the windows.old folders from all the builds. And we can go to users. Here's my user. And you can see the final icons. And here's all of the stuff. Does this entitled photo still work? It looks like it does not. This picture no longer opens. This text document still opens. This one still opens. The journal document opens in the final version of Notepad. Photo Gallery can't open this picture because it is being edited in another program. Wait a minute, why is it opening journal? Oh, okay, there we go. It was just taking an eternity to load. So there we go. That one still works. That still works. Here's that random contact information. Here's a folder with the picture, and then we have a blank folder. And then of course we have the briefcase. But this is the final dialog for Windows Briefcase. And so there we go. We have completed a long and tumultuous journey through the development of Windows Vista, stemming from a long and extensive development process of Windows Longhorn before the reset of development until its eventual completion. However, as I mentioned, there were many problems that Vista had, mainly with lack of compatibility of drivers. However, those issues would later be addressed with Windows 7. And that is what we are going to be taking a look at the development of next time. But until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.